It's the 4th of July. The smell of sunscreen, charcoal, and sea salt fills the air. Beach towels are laid out like flags across golden sand. Kids are digging holes to nowhere. And in the distance, waves lap the shore like they've done every summer since forever. The vibe is American joy, red, white, and blue pride, a hot dog in one hand and ice cream melting down the other. And yet, lurking somewhere just off the coast is the reason you're only dipping your toes in the water. Because you've seen Jaws. We all have. Or at least, we've felt it. That primal fear. That gut-level tension every time your feet leave the sand. It doesn't matter if you're in Cape Cod or California. It doesn't matter if the beach is clear and the water's calm. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you know something could be down there. Something watching. Something waiting. This is the legacy of Jaws. Not just a movie, but a cultural earthquake. The original summer blockbuster. The film that made us think twice about going for a swim. Turned Steven Spielberg into a household name. And forever rewrote the rules of Hollywood. And it started in the summer of 1975. The summer the shark came. Let's rewind for a second. In the years leading up to Jaws, July 4th meant something very different on screen. Sure, there were big movies, but not events. Summer was a dumping ground for B-movies, drive-in schlock, or stuff studios didn't know what to do with. The real Oscar contenders dropped in the fall or the winter. Summer was when the kids went outside and studios took naps. But all of that was about to change. Because in 1974, a 26-year-old kid named Steven Spielberg, fresh off his haunting TV thriller, Duel, took on a scrappy adaptation of a best-selling novel about a killer shark terrorizing a beach town. It was supposed to be a small film, a thriller, a fast shoot, but it became something else entirely, something mythic, something legendary. Before the bullet hit the water, before the ominous cello of John Williams gave us cinematic PTSD, before the term blockbuster meant anything at all, Jaws was just a gamble, a risky one. Based on a book by Peter Benchley, Jaws wasn't exactly Shakespeare. It was pulp, a fun beach read, the kind of thing you'd find tucked next to sunscreen in a beach bag. And yet, there was something in the premise. A giant great white shark relentlessly stalking a quiet New England town. The primal terror of being hunted from below. It spoke to something ancient, something universal. Spielberg saw that, and he ran with it. But let's be real. The odds were stacked against him. Filming on the ocean was unheard of. The mechanical shark barely worked. The script was rewritten constantly. The cast, Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw, were brilliant, but famously tense behind the scenes. The budget ballooned. The studio panicked. Jaws was a mess. And yet somehow, out of the chaos, came a masterpiece. The first time most people saw Jaws, they weren't prepared. It wasn't just a thriller. It was visceral. That opening scene, Chrissy Watkins running into the surf, the silence, the pull, the scream. It was unlike anything audiences had ever felt. This wasn't a monster movie where you saw the beast right away. It's about what you couldn't see, the fear of the unknown, and the fear that just maybe this could happen to you. Spielberg didn't invent suspense, but he perfected it. And he had a secret weapon, a mechanical shark that didn't work. Seriously, the mechanical shark, nicknamed Bruce, was a disaster. Constantly malfunctioning, barely usable. But he turned this into a gift in disguise. Forced to hide the shark for most of the movie, Spielberg leaned into the power of suggestion. Every ripple in the water, every floating barrel, every panicked scream. It made the shark feel even more terrifying, because we had to imagine it. Less was more, and it worked. Jaws tapped into something primal in our DNA. The prehistoric fear of being hunted. The helplessness of floating in a vast, unforgiving ocean. And did it with style, precision, and just the right amount of gore. But it wasn't just the scares. It was the vibe. Amity Island felt real. It felt like your hometown beach. The mayor in denial. The police chief trying to protect his family. The salty sea captain with a haunted past. Every character, every scene felt lived in. Spielberg wasn't just making a monster movie. He was building a world. And then there was the score. John Williams' 2-note theme became shorthand for danger. You could play it in a bathtub and send someone screaming out of the room. It's one of the most iconic pieces of music in film history, and it was almost too simple. Spielberg even laughed when he heard it the first time, but it worked. Like a heartbeat building toward doom. It was pure cinematic hypnosis. By the time the final act arrived, with Brody, Hooper, and Quint hunting the beast on the orca, we were hooked. This wasn't just survival. It was mythology. Man versus nature. Science versus instinct. Pride versus chaos. And when Chief Brody finally took the shot that blew the shark sky high, that wasn't just a victory. That was America winning summer. But we'll get to the explosion, the box office takeover, and the legacy soon enough. Right now, think about this. What other film has literally kept generations of people from going into an ocean? What other movie gets dusted off every 4th of July like a family heirloom? You're not just watching Jaws for fireworks and hot dogs. You're watching because it feels like summer. The real summer. The one with danger under the surface, where the water is warm, the sun is high, and something's watching just from below. So pop in that VHS or cue it up on streaming. Crack a cold one. Watch the gulls circling above. And the next time your foot hits the water, just remember, you're going to need a bigger boat. If you had asked anyone in early 1974 what Jaws would become, they'd probably laugh. Because at that point, Jaws wasn't a Hollywood juggernaut. It wasn't the movie that changed 4th of July forever. It wasn't even a guaranteed success. It was a barely functioning, over-budget, near-cursed mess of a production, helmed by a young, untested director and centered around a shark that didn't even work. In short, it was a disaster waiting to happen. And yet, somehow, that disaster launched the modern blockbuster. Let's go back to where it all began. Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. That's where production set up camp in May of 1974. It was a sleepy, picture-perfect New England island, the kind of place you'd want to spend a quiet summer afternoon. That's exactly why Spielberg chose it. Amity needed to feel real. Small-town America, ice cream shops, and weather-worn docks. A place you could believe in before terror struck. But filming on the ocean, that was something that nobody did. See, water is the great equalizer in filmmaking. Cameras can't stay stable. Actors get seasick. Light constantly changes. And worst of all, your $1 million shark robot might just sink, which it did, a lot. The shark, or Bruce, as it was lovingly or bitterly called by the crew, was a 25-foot mechanical beast built by effects wizard Bob Mady. It was impressive, in theory. There were actually 3 sharks, one full-bodied and 2 side-specific ones for different camera angles. But once they hit the water, things went sideways, fast. Salt water wrecked the electronics. The skin tore. Hydraulics jammed. It sank. Multiple times. The shark was supposed to be the star. But for most of the shoot, Spielberg had to hide it, or risk the whole thing looking like an underwater Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. That meant improvising. Spielberg started suggesting the shark through POV shots, ominous ripples, and the now legendary theme from John Williams. Every time the shark should have appeared, we got dread instead. Tension, suspense, the idea of a shark. And somehow, that made it even scarier. But it wasn't just the shark. The human side of the production was just as chaotic. Take the cast. Roy Scheider was calm and composed, the emotional center as Chief Brody. Richard Dreyfuss was the nerdy, neurotic Hooper, adding a much-needed shot of energy. But Robert Shaw as Quint, the grizzled shark hunter, was a wild card. Shaw was brilliant, no doubt, but he was also a heavy drinker, prone to mood swings and creative clashes. He and Dreyfuss couldn't stand each other. The tension you see on screen, that wasn't acting. That was real. Shaw would belittle Dreyfuss between takes. Dreyfuss would mock Shaw's drunkenness. Spielberg later said that directing them was like managing a daycare for emotionally damaged sea captains. Still, the tension worked. Their dynamic gave the film its soul. When the 3 of them, Brody, Hooper, and Quint, head out on the orca to face the shark, it's not just man versus beast. It's men facing their fears, their pasts, and each other. And in the middle of it all, a young Steven Spielberg, just 26, was trying to hold it all together. Let's talk about Spielberg for a second. By 1974, he'd made waves with a made-for-TV movie called Duel, a masterclass in tension about a man being chased by an unseen trucker. It was lean, tight, and terrifying. Producers Richard Zanuck and David Brown saw it and thought, this kid can handle sharks. But Spielberg had never made a movie of this size, and he knew it. He called Jaws his film school. Every day was a new disaster, a storm, a delay, a malfunction. The shoot was supposed to last 55 days. It ended up going over 150. The budget exploded from $4 million to nearly $9 million. The studio considered firing him. He was scared, and yet he never blinked. Spielberg had a vision. He believed in the story. He believed in the characters. He believed that the fear of the unknown, not just a shark, but the loss of safety, could strike deeper than any monster. He trusted his instincts, and he refused to give up. The turning point came in one of the film's most legendary moments, the Indianapolis speech. You know the one. Late at night, aboard the Orca, Quint starts telling the story of the USS Indianapolis, the real-life World War II disaster where hundreds of sailors were stranded in the ocean, picked off by sharks. It's chilling, mesmerizing, and gives Jaws a gravitas most horror films never earn. But here's the thing. It wasn't even in the original script. The scene was added late, after Shaw suggested the story needed more weight. Spielberg agreed. Shaw helped rewrite it, and when the cameras rolled, magic happened. That speech elevated the film. It wasn't just a shark movie anymore. It was about trauma, about memory, about men haunted by the past, facing death again. It gave audiences something to feel beyond fear. And then, finally, the shark showed up. Late in the third act, when the beast rises from the water behind Brody, it's not just a jump scare. It's catharsis. We had waited for so long, felt so much, imagined every nightmare, and now it's here. You know the line. You're going to need a bigger boat. That line wasn't even in the script. It was improvised by Roy Scheider. Spielberg loved it so much, he kept it in. That's how Jaws worked. Happy accidents, smart improvisation, and just enough control to make chaos look like destiny. When the film finally finished, the studio didn't know what to expect. Would people care? Would they even go to the movies in the summer? Was the shark too fake? They needn't have worried. Jaws opened on June 20th, 1975, across 464 theaters. At the time, that was massive. Studios usually rolled movies out slowly, city by city. But Universal had a hunch. They blanketed TV with ads, pushed trailers hard, and made it an event. And it worked. People lined up around the block, over and over again. By the end of its first month, Jaws had shattered records. By the end of the summer, it had become the highest grossing film of all time, beating out The Godfather. It was more than just money. It had changed the entire industry. Jaws created the idea of a summer movie season. It proved that June and July weren't just dumping grounds. They were prime real estate. Studios took notice. They started chasing the next Jaws. Bigger budgets, more spectacle, wider releases, strategic marketing, and just 2 years later, Star Wars would take the baton and run. But Spielberg started it, with a busted shark and a vision. Looking back now, it's hard to imagine how close it all came to sinking. One more mechanical failure, and we might never have seen the shark. One more fight between the actors, and the chemistry might have cracked. One more studio exec pulling the plug, and Spielberg never made Raiders, E.T., Jurassic Park, any of it. But fate held. And what we got was more than just a movie. We got a moment, a phenomenon, a film that made us think twice about going back in the water. You don't see the shark for over an hour. That's the first great trick of Jaws, and maybe it's most important. Because by the time the beast finally rises from the deep, jagged teeth bared, black eyes rolling with dead hunger, you already feel it. You've been swimming in dread since the first notes of John Williams' score. Spielberg didn't just build a shark, he built suspense. He weaponized the idea of waiting. And the brilliance of Jaws isn't what it shows, it's what it withholds. Let's talk about the monster, Bruce. The affectionate name of the mechanical shark borrowed from Steven Spielberg's lawyer was a nightmare from day one. We've already covered how much it failed, but here's what matters most. Those failures forced Spielberg to innovate, because the plan was never to hide the shark. In fact, the original script showed the shark early and often, but when Bruce kept shorting out, leaking, or simply refusing to float, Spielberg made a decision that would define him. He leaned into absence. He used POV shots, the camera gliding just below swimmers, like a silent predator. He used barrels bobbing on the surface like a shark radar. He used shadows, music, screams, all to suggest the thing just out of frame. And in doing so, Spielberg triggered something ancient in us, a primal fear, the fear of what we can't see. See, the human brain fills in blanks. It has to. It's why a creak in the hallway at night feels like a ghost. It's why a ripple on the surface makes your heart spike. Spielberg turned the audience into co-directors of their own nightmares. By letting us imagine the shark, he made it ours. And when it finally arrived, those massive jaws snapping through the side of the orca, it was earned. It wasn't a jump scare. It was a release. You weren't screaming because a rubber shark popped into frame. You were screaming because it had been there the whole time, in your head. The film's use of space and silence is just as masterful. Take the scene where Chief Brody sits on the beach, scanning the water. It's daytime. Kids are laughing. People are relaxing. But the way Spielberg shoots it, the cuts, the music, the lingering shots on the ocean, build unbearable tension. And then, boom, a shark attack, blood in the water, panic. No music, no warning, just carnage. That contrast between peace and chaos, stillness and violence, is what gives Jaws its power. Spielberg plays the audience like an instrument, tightening strings, holding tension, then snapping them. And then there's the sound design. Let's be honest, Jaws would still be a good movie without John Williams, but with him, it becomes iconic. The main theme, 2 notes, repeating, rising. It may be the most famous in film history. But what makes it genius isn't just the melody, it's the simplicity. It's when it's used. The theme only plays when the shark is truly present. So once you figure that out, Spielberg flips it. He withholds the music during one attack, and the silence becomes terrifying. Because you've been trained to expect the cue, and when it doesn't come, your brain panics. It's psychological warfare, set to cello. Now let's shift gears. Let's talk about the orca. That rust bucket fishing boat isn't just a set dressing. It's a stage, a character, a microcosm of masculinity, class, trauma, and ego, floating in shark-infested waters. You've got Chief Brody, afraid of the ocean, holding on to law and order. You've got Matt Hooper, the rich, educated scientist, full of data and theory. And then there's Quint, the blue-collar, war-scarred captain who sees the sea as both a battleground and religion. Put those 3 on the boat, and then stir. The orca isn't just a location, it's a crucible. The pressure builds, the walls close in, and with every groan of the hull, every inch the shark tears away, we watch these men unravel, face their fears, find common ground, or die trying. Quint especially becomes larger than life. He's Ahab, he's Hemingway, he's the old man in the sea, with a bottle of booze and a homemade harpoon. But he's not a cartoon. Robert Shaw grounds him in pain. That Indianapolis speech, delivered in one long, hypnotic take, peels away the swagger and reveals the scar tissue. Suddenly, the hunt isn't just about the shark. It's about control, about facing what you couldn't face the first time. Quint doesn't just hate the shark. He needs to kill it. And here's the kicker. Even after everything, Spielberg still wasn't sure it would work. When the first test screenings happened, audiences screamed, clapped, covered their eyes. And when Brody delivered that final shot, air tank exploding, shark chunks raining down, they cheered. Spielberg couldn't believe it. He'd spent over a year in production hell, fought through storms, egos, and a fake shark. He thought he might never work again. Instead, he'd created a cinematic masterpiece. Because what he understood, what Jaws proves, is that fear isn't about monsters. It's about what's beneath the surface. Let's be honest. The shark isn't really just a shark. It's nature, yes, but it's also chaos, the unknown, that thing we all can't tame. It could be death. It could be war. It could be trauma. It changes depending on who's watching. That's the brilliance of Jaws. It's a Rorschach test. Some people see a creature feature. Some see a thriller. Some see a metaphor for the American psyche post-Vietnam. Some see the blueprint of modern blockbusters. All are right, because Jaws is all of those things and more. You walk away from Jaws changed, even if just a little. The next time you're at the beach, something flickers in the back of your mind. A shape, a shadow, a little voice that says, "Don't swim out too far." That's not an accident. That's design. Spielberg didn't make a movie. He made a memory. By the time Jaws opened on June 20th, 1975, the shark was already in the water. Not just in the movie, but in America. People were talking. The buzz was unreal. The trailers were terrifying. The poster, the iconic image of a great white charging toward an unsuspecting swimmer, hung in every theater, department store, and bedroom across the country. There had never been anything quite like it. Because Jaws wasn't just a movie, it was an event. And from that first blood-slicked weekend, Hollywood would never be the same. Let's break this down. Before Jaws, most movies didn't open nationwide. They'd premiered big cities first, New York, LA, Chicago, and then slowly roll out to smaller markets over the weeks or even months. It was a trickle, not a flood. But Universal had a different idea. They had saw what they had, a thrill ride with mass appeal. So they rolled the dice on something bold. They'd open the movie wide from the jump. Hundreds of theaters, coast to coast, all at once. To pull it off, they launched a marketing blitz. Television ads, radio spots, print campaigns. That terrifying minimalist theme blared in speakers in every living room. It was everywhere. And the genius part? They focused on fear. The ads leaned into tension. The silence, the slow build, the tagline said it all. You'll never go in the water again. And America bought in, hard. The first weekend, chaos. Lines wrapped around blocks, sold out shows, people fainting, screaming, running for exits. Some brought their own barf bags. Others came back the next day to see it again, and again, and again. Within 2 weeks, Jaws had grossed more than $60 million, an astronomical number at the time. By the end of the summer, it had broken every box office record in existence. It became the first ever film to earn over $100 million in U.S. theatrical rentals. Eventually, it surpassed The Godfather to become the highest grossing movie of all time. A shark movie, a summer release, a nightmare made flesh. Spielberg was suddenly a household name. In Hollywood, it was taking notes. Here's what changed. The summer season became prime time. Jaws flipped the calendar. No longer was summer just for drive-in schlock or re-releases. It was now the time to drop your biggest, loudest, and most crowd-pleasing hits. Studios started planning around June and July, like generals preparing for battle. Wider releases became the standard. That huge rollout, it became the norm. You didn't ease a movie into theaters, you blitzed the country with it. Big openings, big marketing, big returns. The idea was make your money fast, before word of mouth could kill you. Merchandising and cross-promotion. Though Jaws didn't go as full force on merchandise as later blockbusters, Star Wars would take that ball and sprint. It planted the seed. T-shirts, posters, board games, mugs. If it had teeth, they slapped a shark on it. High concept simplicity. One of the most lasting impacts of Jaws was proving a simple idea, executed well, could dominate the world. One sentence, one poster, one primal fear. You didn't need a dozen stars or a twisty plot. All you needed was clarity. But this wasn't just about movies. Jaws hit the culture like a lightning bolt. The word Jaws became shorthand for danger, for dread, for the thing that lurks just beneath. Beach Town saw a dip in tourism. Lifeguards reported spikes and false alarms. Shark sightings were suddenly front-page news, even when there weren't any sharks. Bookshelves flooded with imitators. Killer whales, killer bears, killer piranhas. People were scared, and they loved it. In Spielberg, he tapped into something timeless. Let's not forget the emotional aftermath. For some, Jaws was a horror story. For others, it was liberating. Because what Spielberg captured wasn't just fear, it was confronting fear. Facing it, staring it down. Brody, Hooper, and Quint weren't just trying to kill a shark. They were trying to reclaim peace, safety, sanity. And when Brody finally blew up that monster in one well-placed shot, it wasn't just catharsis, it was redemption. For Brody, for the town, for the audience, we'd survived the hunt. We'd faced the abyss, and we'd walked away. Shaky, soaked, but alive. And here's where things get even deeper. Jaws didn't just change Hollywood marketing. It changed how we experience movies. It proved that cinema wasn't just an entertainment. It could be communal, experiential, a roller coaster in the dark, something you felt with a crowd. It set the blueprint for what we now call the event movie. The kind that has you lining up at midnight, wearing the t-shirts, quoting the lines, talking about it for weeks. That kind of magic, it started here, with a busted shark, a beach town, and a haunting 2-note score. And of course, there was fallout, good and bad. Sharks, once mysterious and misunderstood, became movie monsters overnight. Conservationists struggled against the fear spiral Jaws ignited. Great whites were hunted. Shark attacks made headlines, even when they were rare or misreported. Peter Benchley himself, the author of the original novel, eventually became an ocean activist. He spent the rest of his life trying to protect the creatures his book had demonized. In that way, Jaws is a paradox. It raised awareness of the ocean's power, but it also unleashed a wave of fear that harmed the very ecosystem it portrayed. It showed us beauty and terror, and left us unsure where one ended and the other began. But let's bring it back to where it all started. Summer. Because Jaws is still the ultimate summer movie. Not just because of the setting, or the beach scenes, or the July 4th chaos, but because it feels like summer. The heat, the tension, the way time stretches out when you're scared, the sweat on your neck when something isn't quite right, the laughter in the air, and the silence just below it. Jaws is summer as myth, as warning, as legend. And every year, when the sun comes out and the grills fire up, we revisit. Because it's not just about being scared, it's about remembering why we love the water in the first place, and respecting what swims beneath it. Time passes, seasons change, movies come and go. But Jaws stays with you. Maybe it's the fear, maybe it's the thrill, maybe it's that low, humming cello in your head every time your foot leaves the ocean floor. Whatever it is, nearly 50 years later, that shark is still circling. And here we are, still watching the water. So what happened after the shark blew up? After Chief Brody smiled, paddled away with Hooper, and faded into the horizon? Hollywood did what it always does. It tried to catch the lightning in a bottle, again and again and again. Enter the sequels. Jaws 2 hit theaters in 1978. Same town, new shark. Same basic premise. Amity Island just can't catch a break. This time, Chief Brody returns to take on another great white. This one stalking teenagers and boaters like it's got a personal grudge. To its credit, Jaws 2 had its moments. The tagline was unforgettable. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. But it lacked the patience, the slow burn dread, the human soul of the original. It was bigger, louder, and more mechanical. A theme that would repeat in countless blockbusters to come. It did well at the box office, but the magic was already fading. Then came Jaws 3D in 1983. Yes, really. Set in a SeaWorld-style marine park in Florida, this one was all about gimmicks. 3D glasses, jump scares, a waterlogged Dennis Quaid. The shark is now a full-on slasher villain, bursting through underwater glass like a Finn Jason Voorhees. It's not great. Can't be sure. Fun in a trashy, late-night TV kind of way, but it strays so far from the DNA of the original that it feels like parody. And yet, it wasn't the bottom, because that would be Jaws, The Revenge, 1987. This one follows the widow of Chief Brody, who's now convinced the shark is targeting her family out of vengeance. Yes, seriously. That shark follows them to the Bahamas. It roars. Mario Van Peebles tries a Caribbean accent. Michael Caine flies a plane into the ocean. It is cinematic chaos, a beautiful disaster. Michael Caine missed accepting his Oscar for Hannah and Her Sisters because he was filming this. When asked about it, he famously said, "I've never seen it, but by all accounts, it is terrible. However, I have seen the house that it built, and it is terrific." But even with diminishing returns, the legend of Jaws refused to sink. The original was too strong, too ingrained, too mythic. By the 90s and 2000s, Jaws had become sacred text, quoted, studied, parodied, and worshipped. It popped up in The Simpsons, Family Guy, Finding Nemo. There were documentaries, coffee table books, limited edition re-releases. Steven Spielberg himself never returned to the franchise. He didn't need to. He'd done the impossible already. And maybe, deep down, he knew there was no improving it, just honoring it. And the homages kept coming. Take Jurassic Park, Spielberg's own 1993 dinosaur opus. It's Jaws on land. Same structure, same slow build, same awe-to-tension transition. A predator you can't stop. Science versus nature. Control versus chaos. Swap out the shark for a T-Rex, and you can practically hear the cello. Or look at Sharknado, Deep Blue Sea, The Meg, 47 meters down. All descendants of Jaws, in one way or another. Some leaned into the absurd, some chased the suspense, but none forget where the blood trail began. But beyond film and pop culture, Jaws left this mark in the most unexpected way, in our relationship with the ocean. The shark, once a mysterious, ancient apex predator, became a villain, a slasher icon, a monster, and the real sharks paid the price. In the decades after Jaws, public fear skyrocketed. Shark populations plummeted due to hunting, finning, and misguided revenge. People feared what they didn't understand. Peter Benchley, The man who wrote the original novel spent the rest of his life trying to undo the damage. He became a vocal conservationist, working to protect the very creatures his story helped vilify. He later said, "If I had known then what I know now about sharks, I never would have written Jaws." But the story had already escaped. It wasn't about science anymore. It was about myth. And yet, for all the fear Jaws inspired, it also sparked curiosity. It made generations look at the ocean with wonder, with awe, with respect. It turned marine biology into a dream job. It made kids want to learn about sharks, to understand them, protect them, dive with them. And for every person scared out of the water, there was someone else drawn toward it. Because Jaws showed us how wild, how raw, how alive the sea really was. It reminded us that we are guests in the ocean, and not always welcome. So here we are, nearly a half-century later, and that shark still swims. Every July, Jaws returns to theaters, to living rooms, to backyards with inflatable screens and bowls of popcorn. It's tradition now. Fireworks in the sky, something cold in your hand, and that theme creeping beneath it all. Because it's not just a film anymore, it's a ritual. Because Jaws didn't just change summer. It became part of the American summer. And maybe that's the real genius of it. Jaws is a horror movie that lives in the sunshine. It's not dark and stormy. It's bright, warm, inviting. All until it's not. That's why it sticks with you. That's why you remember it. Because fear in the shadows is expected. But fear in daylight, at the beach, surrounded by laughter and seagulls, that's something primal. That's something that you carry with you. So next time you're at the beach, look out at the water. Feel the sun on your face. Hear the kids yelling. Let your feet touch the edge of the surf. And then take a step in. Remember, it's not just about being scared. It's about respect. About the stories we tell. About the simple way a movie made by a 26-year-old kid and a broken robot shark changed everything. You'll never go in the water the same way again. And you wouldn't want to. Because every summer needs a legend. And Jaws is ours.